Of course, taking the medicine as prescribed is what you should do, but I wasn't doing that. I was just trying to make it stop. And so every day I would take a little more and then a little more. And before I knew it, uh, the pain I was feeling um, wasn't as big an issue as the pain of getting sick from not having the medicine.
Alrighty, welcome back everyone to this month's episode of Finding Mental Wellness. I am your host, Taylor Brown, and today we have the pleasure of speaking with somebody that is very near and dear to me, somebody that was with me in the beginning of my recovery process and has quite a story to tell us today, Scott Pritchard. Scott, thanks for being here, man.
Hey, you're very welcome, brother.
I want to give you like a lot of room here and freedom to go where you need to go with telling your story, but I think with as much as you're comfortable with, tell us your story. Tell us what happened. What did it used to be like, and how did things progress for you?
I'll tell you, there was probably a 20-year period leading up to my active addiction where I had well, I still have it. It's just being controlled by nerve medication now. It was a damaged nerve in my brain. The pain was, I don't even know how to describe it. It was beyond anything I've ever been through in my life. Obviously, saw a lot of doctors. I was prescribed a lot of different types of medications. They weren't all pain medications. Went through a lot of different things from a needle being injected through my jaw and up behind my eye, and different things like that. Then I got on a pain contract, and it was such that the pain got to a point where, of course, taking the medicine as prescribed is what you should do, but I wasn't doing that. I was just trying to make it stop. And so every day I would take a little more and then a little more. And before I knew it, the pain I was feeling um, wasn't as big an issue as the pain of getting sick from not having the medicine. Yeah, it blew my life apart. I had 30 years as a pastor. Uh, and there's so many parts that in my life towards the end of my active time in ministry that I was ashamed of, because I was actually, the last year I was in the church ministering to people high. And obviously disconnected from my wife and my kids. Um, couldn't keep my job, couldn't function, couldn't do anything. But at that time in my life, I didn't care about anything but how to get the drugs, how to use the drugs, and how to get more drugs. So I turned into a thief. And it wasn't the stereotypical where you think, well, he's breaking into houses and stealing stuff to get money. No, I was just anybody I knew that had pain medication, I was taking it from them. I was stealing from them. And April 5th, 2018, I got caught stealing from my mother-in-law. And at that point, it was two choices: rehab or lockup.
What was that moment like? What was that? Describe that moment for us, if you don't mind.
It was horrendous. Not only was I overwhelmed with guilt and shame because my wife and kids were there when it happened, every ounce of my being wanted to run. I wanted to just get out and take off. Um, it was bad. My wife was just so overcome, she didn't even know what to say. And she knew prior to this that I had a drug problem, but I would just lie. Like every person in active addiction, you just lie. You simply lie. You cover up what you're doing, and it tells you where your mind is at, right? Because you know the other person knows you're lying. I mean, your wife knows you better than anybody, and she's seen you enough high to know you're lying. I mean, I would get a 30-day prescription for morphine, and it'd be gone in 8 days. You know. I was secretly wearing fentanyl patches without her knowing. I was passing out and hurting myself. And of course, isolated big time. Took all my meals in the bedroom, took my guns out and made threatening videos and um, whatnot. Now, having said all that, uh, I grew up in a pretty brutal household, and I'm not using that as an excuse because there's a lot of people out there that grew up in a bad household that didn't fall into alcohol and drugs, and I did. The biggest problem with continuing in my addiction was is I discovered that my brain went blank. So all emotion left me. In other words, when I was high, it wasn't just the feeling of being high, it was the fact that all the emotional things that go on inside your head when you're tore up about finances, about relationships, about work, about daily living, all that was gone. The house could have caught fire and I'd be like, well, I guess the house is going to burn down. I just didn't care.
Just so apathetic.
Very apathetic and just and the thing was, that part of my drug addiction and my active addiction was the most appealing part of it. Just the lack of total emotional feeling, I really liked that a lot. I disconnected from my family. Oh, I was in the same room with them a lot of times, but I wasn't there. Oh. And, I destroyed relationships and, uh, lost innumerable amount of money, you know, and left my wife and children in a bad way because once I went into rehab, that income was gone. It had been off and on leading up to that, but the income was gone. And I'll never forget the day driving down the road to come. I was, and it was weird. You wouldn't think you would be, but I was angry. I was just angry that I was going to rehab and that I'd been caught and that this was it. And just a total train wreck.
I can relate to that.
Not caring. There was just no sense of, I finally sat down and wrote my mother-in-law a very long letter, but it was a long time after I was out of rehab because when I was in rehab, what I learned about myself and what I learned about trying to mend and repair relationships that you break when you're not sober is that a quick apology is just simply you trying to soothe your feelings about what you've done, as opposed to really giving it thought and understanding the wreckage you've caused. So I waited quite a long time to write my mother-in-law a letter. And I told her in the letter, and this was the honest to God's truth, at the end of my active addiction, I was less human and more animal than anything. And all I looked at her at and anybody else at was a source. They weren't friends. They weren't family. They weren't nothing. They were just a source. I knew you had these medications, and all I cared about was getting my hands on them. I didn't view you as my mother-in-law. I didn't view you as my wife. I didn't view you as this good friend. I viewed you as somebody that I could take advantage of to take care of me. And I only cared about me. And it was all about me. And yeah, so I destroyed that 30 years of ministry and the guilt and the shame that came with that because there were so many people in church. They look at your pastor and you think, the stand-up guy, and it turned out to be that no, I was actually a falling down guy that just covered it up really well.
That was a really good description that you said. I really can relate to that when you were talking about how your addiction gets you to this place where you're so absorbed in what you need and want, or what you think you need and want, that you only view other people as just a means to an end. It's
That's
really
it.
just, it's a tool. It's a tool. And that's all it is, right? And
That's it.
I tell people, when I think about my addiction and I really, really think back into what it was, I felt like a wild animal that had been cornered. That's what I felt like when I was in interactions, you know?
Absolutely. Like I said, the day I got caught when I had taken my mother-in-law's pain meds and I got caught, every cell in my body, I wanted to run. I felt cornered. I felt caged. I thought, oh man, I got to get out of here. And it's like, I guess some small part of my brain that was still functioning said, "Then what? You run and then what are you gonna do?" I mean, I had a life. I had children and a wife and a home and, up to that point, a job, So what was I going to do if I ran? Where was I going to go? You know, I would have just live under a bridge, I guess, go out in the street and just be there and then just throw everything else away. So I guess that little bit of my brain that maybe was still there said, no, this is it. You're either going to go to rehab or you're going to go to jail. One of the two. Still to this day, and April 9th of this month, April 9th, was 8 years for me. And there's still some relationships I don't have back, and I probably never will get back. You do the best you can, going through the steps and working the books and working the program. But there are some people that you hurt so bad, they don't want any more to do with you. There's no parades or banners because you got clean. There's a life you have to pick up and try to reinvent yourself. And that's literally what I had to do. I had to reinvent myself and start all over again from the bottom. And, the time I came in, I was the oldest guy in the house, you know, in there with a bunch of guys that were half my age. Some of them could have been my kids, that's what the age they were, and I'm thinking, man, what am I doing here? Why am I here with these guys? This is a young man's thing, but no, addiction and not being sober touches a whole wide range of ages, people, and professions. It's not just the guy behind the dumpster in the alley. It's lawyers, it's doctors, it's cops, it's judges, it's blue collar workers, it's old people, it's young people, it's middle-aged people. And it'll grab you. And if it does, you can kill yourself and destroy your life. And fortunately, I didn't kill myself, but I did destroy my life. Sad part is I dragged other people along with that, though.
You made another really good point, that I think a lot of people still, unfortunately, as much as you and I know this in our core, that addiction does not discriminate. It does amaze me how many people are out there that don't really understand that. They think that that just happens to certain types of people or certain people from certain upbringings or whatever it may be. And I really want to hear more, after this about, more like maybe childhood and early years and all that. But it's interesting because, I mean, I came from a really well-to-do family, right? In Leawood, Kansas, and I turned out to be a raging, severe drug addict alcoholic, and you were a preacher, right? And some people would think like, "Oh, they have a balance in life. They know how to go about doing things. They know how to live a godly life. They know how to do these things." And it's like, "No." And I mean, you and I have known doctors, attorneys, high-ranking, military people, politicians that actors who, unravel. And it really is, it's a disease, right? It's a chronic relapsing disease that will kill you, and unless you can develop some type of recovery process. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of put an exclamation point on that statement you made about, it doesn't care who you are, where you're from, how much money you have. That's just more stuff for it to take before you die.
And in certain ways, I think those that are better off than others financially, how much easier is it for them to acquire what they want in that realm because they have capital to spend?
It's almost more dangerous. They almost get to a more wicked bottom, I think, at times because they're insulated by that financial ability to, whether it's to get out of trouble or to obtain more stuff, and it can get bad before they have to start doing what, stealing or whatever, or some of the stuff you were talking about, which pretty much every person who struggles with severe addiction gets to that point. But yeah, I think it's dangerous for the ones who have excess finances because they can get to just as hopeless of a state of how much they're using without having to steal.
Listen, they DoorDash it. They they basically DoorDash it. If they want something and they have the money, they just have it delivered and they have it. You know, Unlike me, I was out stealing people's meds. But yeah, if you have deep pockets, you can just call up whoever it is and just say, "Hey, I need this," and bring it to them. So in a lot of ways, it is dangerous. But yeah, I was in rehab. We were in group meetings with people that were professional people. Had high paying jobs. So it doesn't discriminate. It's not the toothless homeless person you see out here behind the railroad tracks all the time. It's everybody. And you start down that road and yeah, once it grabs you and it's got you until you absolutely decide I've had enough and I'm going to get this thing straightened out.
tell us about growing up. What was it like growing up? As much as you're comfortable with talking about.
Neither of my parents were drinkers or druggies at all. My dad was about 6'9" and about 3 bills all my life. Big man, hard worker. A lot of times I remember 2 or 3 jobs. Just worked all his life. That was his mantra: work. But he didn't understand how to raise children because there was never any talking in my home. My dad expressed himself by punching you and hitting. And um, so there was a lot of violence in my home. I went to school more than once with a black eye or a busted mouth. Um, and in those days, even when you showed up at elementary school looking like that, they looked at it, but it wasn't as proactive as it is now if a child shows up looking like they've been beat up. And I can recall vividly one time someone came from the school, not from child services, but from the school to talk to my dad, and my dad threatened to kill him. Yeah, he had the guy by the throat and pushed him up against the wall. And he told him, I know who you are, I know where you live. And you get out of my house, and don't worry about how I raise my kids. And he was the same way on the girls as he was on the boys. Me and my brother and my sisters all got more than our fair share of some good beatings. So it was a very violent home, and you never knew what was going to set my dad off. So you walked around on eggshells and a sense of dread, and he would just explode. We didn't have anybody at the house. We didn't, we could go and spend the night at a friend's, but none of our friends were allowed over. Um, I almost think that was my dad's self-preservation, so maybe that my friends didn't see what was going on.
I was just going to ask, why do you think he did that?
I think he was worried that my friends might see what was happening and go back and tell their parents. And it was the strangest thing, though, because for all the times that went on, the police never showed up at my house for any of it. So I don't know why. I mean, my siblings and me were terrified to tell anybody. So it would have had to have been someone else. My dad kept that very quiet. And then uh, later on in life, as I got older, I come to find out that a lot of what happened to us as kids, my mom put him on to us. We didn't know it at the time, but he'd come home calm, and then she'd get him riled up about something, some little something we had done or not done, and we'd catch a beating for it. Um, and so I left the home and joined the military with all of that on me. And I used to hate the word trauma because I think sometimes that's overused. I didn't like that word because there was a part of me that made it seemed like, okay, I'm letting him win by feeling this way, but it was there and I didn't know it. And um, for the longest time, I blamed my mom and dad for a lot of what went wrong in my life. It took me a while. In fact, it wasn't until I got into rehab that somebody challenged me to write a letter to my parents, tell them all the things that I wanted to tell them. They were gone by this time. And so I did that. And I got to be honest with you, when I wrote that letter and then we went out back and the counselor said, burn it. And I burned it. I got to be honest with you, that may sound like a Dr. Phil kind of thing, but it actually worked. I finally let my parents off the hook. I finally let them off the hook. I know how my dad was raised, and it wasn't good because he was a Depression era kid and he was raised by his grandfather, and it wasn't well, it wasn't good. And I finally let it go. I burnt that letter, and when I did, all the feelings of anger and resentment towards them went with that letter. I haven't thought about it another time since, but I had to get into rehab because I didn't understand at the time that some of what I was doing in active addiction, that part about the numb mind, was me not grinding on how I felt towards my mom and dad. And I'm not saying that what they did was right, because it wasn't, but I took that with me into my adulthood. Okay. And so when I left home, I never looked back. My siblings all stayed around, but I did not. And that was the childhood I had. And I picked up some of my dad's, I don't know if you want to call it bad habits or what, but for me, if it was a round peg, it was going to go in that square hole or I was going to beat it with a hammer. That was it. So I just, that was it. Oh. And that's where I was mentally and emotionally. And I thought that that was all good. But man, when I went into having drugs in my system, those feelings manifest themselves in a very drastic way. It wasn't always good. Not always good. Not towards my wife and kids, but towards anybody outside that home. And I'm telling you now, I could have easily wound up in jail a few times because of how I let that anger out.
So you joined the military pretty at what age? How old were you?
I had the delayed entry program at 17, went straight in out of high school.
So that was maybe one of a couple things that you obviously at some part of you probably was attracted by the idea of doing that, but you wanted to escape.
Yeah, that was it, right? I mean, just I wanted to get out and be out and not ever go back. My siblings that I haven't seen and spoke to in 25 years were all angry at me because they stuck around in the same area, and I just no, no, I'm out. I don't. I no. I did go back and see my father just before he passed, but he was in a medically induced coma. So if he heard anything I had to say, I couldn't tell you. But no, I wanted to escape, and the army was my way out. And once I left home, there was maybe two occasions after that that I ever went back.
What was it like going into the military being so young?
Can I tell you something? I really liked it. I really dug it. It was very structured and disciplined, obviously. But the physicality part of it, I really enjoyed because I was a ball player in high school. And I really enjoyed that part of it, the structure, the discipline, the physicality. I enjoyed the duty stations I was at. Man, South Korea was a blast. I just loved South Korea. In fact, I almost stayed there before I got out. I was about to just stay there. And I didn't, but I enjoyed it there, man. Yeah, the military for me was really great. I got the GI Bill. I got some education in. I learned a skill, and I would have stayed in. My hip gave out, and so I was medically discharged. But yeah, I loved it. The military was really good for me at a time in my life when I was just not in a good place. It helped. And you might be thinking, well, yeah, but aren't the drill? Yeah, the drill sergeants yelled at me, and I thought, man, everybody's upset about these drill sergeants. Listen, I held the flashlight for my dad, so you yelling at me is not going to be nothing.
I've had one since I was a kid.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. So that's that environment you thrived. Did you find any opportunity to drink to excess or use drugs or anything like that while you were in the military?
No, no, yeah. I started smoking in the military, but no, I
Cigarettes?
wasn't a drink. Yeah, cigarettes. I wasn't a drinker, a drugger. No, none of that. I just didn't. I mean, when I was 14, 15, we had our weed parties and we did those kind of things like that. But no, not when I was in the military. Didn't feel any of that. After I got out, I didn't. I was still in pretty good physical shape and um, didn't want to, I had friends that partied, but I never went out to the bars with them and did any of that stuff. I was kind of, to be honest with you, and maybe that was what really manifested itself the most. I was kind of a loner in the sense that there were only a certain, and I know tolerance is part of our program and part of our steps, learning how to be more tolerant because people were tolerant of us at our worst moments, right? But I had very little tolerance for people that were loud, drunk, out of control, and it sounds crazy, right? Well, yeah, well, look what happened to you. You became, right. At that time in my life, I guess because of maybe how I was raised, I didn't like hanging out. I didn't go to house parties. I didn't go to the bars. I didn't hang. I had a small group of friends that I would hang out with, and that was it. And pretty much all my life, I kept my circle very small, very small.
Tell me about the transition of like leaving the military and coming back to society and being a citizen again and kind of finding out what to do there, right?
It was the strangest thing, right? I was told as I was de-roasting out that, you're entitled to go down and collect unemployment. I'd never done that before in my life. So I went down to the Department of Economic Security about 2, 3 weeks after I got out. And I was 25, 24, 25. And I'm in this line with people. They were there getting either their welfare set up or food stamp set up or whatever. And I'm in this line and I'm thinking, this isn't me. I don't, I'm not disabled. I can work. So I just crumpled up this appointment slip they gave me and threw it in the trash and walked out. I was in there looking around. I thought, man, this is not for me. So I went to work in a factory, nut and bolt factory, and worked there for a few years. Now, I had already, when I was stationed in South Korea, I had already started my education towards getting into ministry. And over there was no opportunities when I got back here. So what I did, I contacted our church's offices and said I'm interested in starting a church. And so I took some more education and let me see, I got ordained at 33. I was 33 when I got ordained and pastored uh, 5 churches in total, built one church in Atchison, Kansas. Um, and then that was my life for 30 years. But during that time, as I said, when we started, that this trigeminal nerve in my head, it went berserk, and I had never heard of that before. It was the most excruciating pain. I would literally go a week at a time with no sleep to the point where I was hallucinating. And people may not know this, but if you get too sleep deprived, you will start seeing things that are not there. And I would scream out at the top of my lungs at 3 o'clock in the morning, my wife and kids upstairs sleeping. No exaggeration, banging my head on the wall for it to stop. And I was on every kind of medication you can imagine, butorphanol, nasal phenobarbital, uh, injections of this and that. I went to the VA. They took some swabs about this long and dipped it in something and rammed it clear up in my sinus cavity. And they were all misdiagnosing. They all thought it was a different kind of migraine or something called cluster headaches and this and that. But it took me 20 years to finally break down and go to a neurosurgeon. And 5 minutes into me describing to him what that was, he told me exactly what was wrong. And so I had 2 brain surgeries. They cut into my skull behind my left ear, opened up that nerve. I've got a Teflon wrap around that nerve inside my head right now. Well, 5 days after that surgery, I came down with a raging staph infection that nearly killed me from where that surgery had went into my brain. I was on a PICC line of 2,000 milligrams of rocephin in my arm for 80 days after that. They couldn't even come in my room without being dressed in spaceman suits. Well, I got relief from that problem for 1 year, and I thought it was over. A year after that surgery, it started back up again. So then there was another procedure called gamma knife where they shoot the highest amount of radiation into your head that they're allowed to do. I had a halo on my head. I was chained down to a metal table while an oncologist and my neurosurgeon worked together, pinpointed that nerve and shot radiation into it, and it still didn't die. So after that, the pain meds I was on, and to that point, I had been taking them as prescribed, but after that, the pain came back with a vengeance, and then I started eating pain pills like Pez. I was just sucking them down, and I mean literally, it was so bad, Taylor, that when your prescription's due on a certain day, most normal people go to the pharmacy at 8 or 9 that morning and get their prescription filled. At 12:01 midnight on the day I was allowed to have it filled, I was in the pharmacy.
You found an all-night pharmacy.
I was there at 12:01 midnight at CVS Pharmacy. They told my daughter, "Your dad's got some kind of problem because he's here every time getting that morphine refilled." And none of them knew I wasn't just on the morphine. Like I said, I was wearing fentanyl patches. I was eating hydrocodone. I was stealing oxycodone. And I was so saturated. A lot of people who are on different types of drugs, you don't start getting dope sick for what, 6, 8 hours, 12 hours. You start to feel dope sick. I was so saturated that if I didn't have something more than 2 hours, I was starting to feel sick.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Man, so
The day I arrived here, I thought I was dying.
were you getting stuff from, like, multiple doctors, or were you also getting it off the streets from people?
Oh, I was getting a legitimate prescription from the doctor for the morphine. But here's the thing, like I told you, I'd eat a 30-day supply in 8 days. So I had to supplement to the next prescription, which was due in a month. So I was taking the morphine with hydrocodone, oxycodone, fentanyl patches. So I had probably 3 or 4 different types of pain control medicine on me at any one time besides my morphine, because I knew I was going to eat the morphine quick. And so a 30-day supply and it's gone in 8 days. I can't go back and say, "Hey, I'm out." Well, no, that's not how it works. And my daughter's a pharmacy tech. She knew all about her dad, like, something's off. And someone had said in one of our group sessions one time, I don't remember if it was Jeff or Kevin, I don't remember who said it, but they said this, and nothing more truer words was ever spoken, that my wife would look at me and she would say, "You got a drug problem." And in my head, what they said in there is what I remembered. "I got the drugs, you have the problem." And truer words were never spoken because I visited a torment off on my wife. Her biggest thing in her entire life is that I never lied to her, Taylor. I lied to her every day, all day long. I just lied and lied and lied and lied. And it took me a long time. It's been 8 years, and it's taken me 8 years to gain my wife's trust back. And I thank God for her.
It's a long road of recovery, of rebuilding those relationships and earning back that trust that took a long time to well, no, it doesn't take long to dismantle the trust. It takes a long time to build it, right? It was just probably a few swift moments of action that tore down the trust, right? But then to get it back is yeah, it's funny. A lot of people get sober and they want all the good things. They want to like go make their amends. It's so funny. I remember when we were in groups and stuff and talking about how what are the steps? What do they look like? How do you work them? And one of the guys who'd be newer would say, "Oh yeah, I got to make amends to my girlfriend or so and so," And the guys who'd been there a little longer were like, "No, you don't. You probably need to just kind of focus on getting better for a while before you even do, because you won't even know what to apologize for. You won't know what behaviors that you ought to change." You know?
Well, you have to live some life a little bit after you get out of rehab. That's why it took me so long to write that letter of apology to my mother-in-law, because I needed to let my brain, I don't know that everybody who is an alcoholic or an addict or both understand what you've done to your brain during that active addiction. Those neural pathways that you rewired to only crave the meds and the alcohol, they don't just pop back because you're detoxed. Okay, you can go somewhere for 30 days and get detoxed, but you've done some stuff to the wiring up there that's going to take you a while to really focus and think, study, work the programs, go to the meetings, do the things you need to do, talk to your sponsor. Life is going to come at you a million miles an hour. The hard work really begins after you get out of rehab, because now you're back out on life. And remember what we learned, and you've talked about it. You're going to have to learn to accept life on life's terms. And that thing, that desire we have in us is, as addictive personalities, to control people, places, and things, that's not going to work anymore. And life is going to raise up sometimes and slap you across the face. And if you're not ready for it, you're going to relapse. The good things you have to work to get back that you've destroyed, remember how hard you had to work to get those things back before you decide, hey, I'm just going to go do this. Now, call your sponsor, call somebody before you do, because going back from a relapse is going to be much harder than the initial time. You're going to find yourself even deeper in and above your eyes than you were the very first time.
Tell us about what it was like when you first got to treatment and just that whole process. Go through recovery and how to build all that.
Well, Jeff was here at that time. Okay. Him and I about got into a fist fight in his office. Literally. I mean, it was a millisecond from blows. I don't remember what I said or what I did. I got to be honest with you. I don't. I know something happened and he yelled and said, there ain't going to be any punching holes in the walls and kicking the furniture and this and that. And I said something back, and I mean to tell you, we were across the desk from each other like this. And my wife standing there. And, you know, of course, I was strung out big time. I weighed 180 pounds. And I'm just thinking to myself, man, I'm going to crack his skull in a second. Well, then my wife's like, you're going to get kicked out of here before you even get in. So he finally asked me, goes, what do you want to get out of this? And then I told him. He said, all right, this is how it works. You are no longer in charge of anything. You're not in charge. So that was kind of I was like, really? And not understanding that I hadn't been in charge of anything for quite some time in active addiction. Yeah. You walk into the rehab going, oh, well, I'm not going to be, you're not going to tell. Buddy, listen, you haven't been in control of nothing for a long time now. So I said, oh, well, my wife, the look on her face, though, Taylor, I'm going to never forget that day. Um, oh, it was bad. And when she leaned in close to me and told me, this is it. That's exactly what she said. She goes, this is it. So then Joey Cappuccino came through and got me. You know, the whole urine test to check where your levels are at and everything. That was fun. They were going through my stuff. They found my antidepressant medication. What are these? Antidepressants, run the numbers. You can check. He said, okay, well, that's what they are. Yeah, I said, yeah, that's what they are. I was lost because I didn't want to be here and I was angry. And then they went through all my clothing, all my stuff. You know, I'm a grown man. I was in my 50s at that time, you know, and I'm like, okay, I got a grown man going through my things. So, okay. And then we get to the house and I see all these young guys and they got the rap music going and, you know, and I was not feeling good at all. The process, though, of being checked in was smooth, even to someone like me. I understood why they were doing what they were doing and I got it. I understood. Getting over to the house was good. Once in the house, a little rough because, like I said, I was the oldest guy there. I thought to myself, man, I got kids your guys' age, man. I know the next morning when I woke up, I screamed at one of the guys about how dirty he was being and how filthy he was being because I was a germaphobe, believe it or not. Me, Mr. Druggy, was a germaphobe. And I know that it didn't go well, but yeah, it was okay. You know, I know I broke the house rules because, you know, you're on blackout for 2 weeks and I just lost my mind with my family. And I think the biggest thing of that day though was when I left to come here and my middle daughter wouldn't say anything to me. And I was just positive in my mind I had lost that relationship forever. She wouldn't speak to me. I said bye to my other kids. They said bye. And my middle daughter wouldn't, she was in her room, with her back to the door. She wouldn't even turn around and look at me. And I, the range of emotions I was going through, plus I'm sick.
You're detoxing.
Yeah, and I am just not feeling well at all. And then all those emotions in your head, like, what have I done? What have I done? What have I done? And that first 2 weeks in the house and going, in the van, out of the van, in the van, out of the van, in the van, out of the van. But going into the meetings and figuring out that I wasn't the POS I thought I was, that this was a disease, that people like me are not uncommon. People my age with this disease are not uncommon. People that are married with kids and family is not uncommon. And that it's got to be addressed like a disease. If you just simply throw the person out and say, nah, this is a choice. This is what you chose to do. Yeah, it was what I chose to do, except there's things within that choosing that make you more susceptible to becoming that kind of a person than other people. And in the choosing to do that, I couldn't get past the fact that after I got out and I called some people that had called me that were struggling, I tell this to every person who is the relative or a friend of someone that is locked down with alcoholism or drugs. Somewhere deep down inside the person you're looking at is the person you used to know. And if you can somehow find it within yourself to hang in there with them, not to your detriment, not to your abuse, not to your financial ruin, but somehow hang as long as you can to be some kind of support to them, they may just come back. And that person you used to know will come back to the surface, not the one you're seeing now. Because inside every addict and alcoholic, the real person they used to be is in there. But the disease has overwhelmed them and tried to kill them off. What we used to say, our brain's taking out a contract on us, you know, and that's how we're wired. And that's how it is. And I was never so glad for the 90 days in my life. When I got home, my wife told me, she goes, you are not the man that left here. And I'm not talking about just the drug addiction. Because I used to snap about every little thing. And when I got home, we went to what's that place we went to when we were in rehab together? That beautiful walking around area where the garden was at.
Was it the Arboretum?
Yeah, we went to the Arboretum, remember? Well, I took them there because they wanted to see it. I had told them about it. And we were coming out, and my daughter spilled an entire giant cup of Coke all over the front seat. Now, before I went into rehab, I'd have broke the windshield out of the car. I'd have ripped the door off because there was this big spill. And they were like, oh, wow. I said, guys, it's not a big deal. Let's just go back in there, tell them what happened, and get some paper towels. We'll clean it up and just go do the best we can. And my wife looked at me and she goes, who are you? Who? Wow. Because they were all holding their breath, expecting me to blow up.
To do what you've been doing for years, right?
Because that's what I'd been doing. And when I learned about my ego and my arrogance and my self-will, and I found out that the idea that it's everybody else's fault but mine is not the right way to go, a real thing came over me about not wanting to be like that anymore, because that was just going to lead back to trouble. when we get in that ego and we get in that arrogance and that self-will, that's going to make you relapse.
I mean, we've seen it time and time again. We've seen a lot of people that not make it, not stick with the tools that we were given in this program. They didn't keep using it. They kind of, it is a certain point in time, sometimes, not everybody, but some people fall prey to kind of taking back control of how they're going to do things and taking back control of how things are going to look. And I think that having to go into treatment, like what you were talking about, it kind of forces a humility upon you. And you're around people that you might not even feel like you can relate to, and it stands out as like, what am I doing here? And that's such a humbling thing to be forced to be around other people that you can't relate to, but to stick it out with them long enough to where you realize you are connected. You do have things in common and you care about each other.
Honestly, they taught me, those young guys in the rehab house taught me how to relate to my kids better. They taught me how to relate to that generation better. My son's 30, my youngest daughter's 22, and my oldest daughter's 40. But being around them, even though at times it was just irritating, taught me how to relate to my own kids better. In fact, some of them actually talked to me about my kids because some of the things that bothered me about them in when I was in the rehab house, they'd say, well, this is why we like this or don't like this. And this, and because it was always an irritation for me with my kids, why are we doing that? Why, and they sat with me and I'd be like, why do you guys do that? Or why do you like that kind of music? Or why do you like this kind of a thing? Why is gaming, my son's a big gamer, even still at 30. Why is gaming something you can do by the hour? And, it's like, because I didn't grow up that way. We didn't have PS5s and Xboxes and all. We didn't have any of that. We had BB guns and we shot each other with them. We did. We threw rocks at each other. And they were like, because this is why we like it. And I was like, well, I understand that. I guess that's, it's entertainment. My generation's entertainment was a different thing, but hey, I'd rather have a young guy at home on his PS5 than out carjacking and doing something wrong.
Gosh, I really want to thank you for your time and talking, vulnerably about all the different things that have gone on in your life and about what it was like for you to go into a treatment center with a bunch of gentlemen that were quite a bit younger than you and getting uncomfortable. And, I think that I'd like to thank you because when I came in, I think, man, I think I was next to dead, and I remember sleeping in that bed for what felt like probably a couple days and being woken up every so often by you. And you'd be like, hey, buddy, you got to get some food in. You like, come on, even if it's just a spoonful. And I think that literally kept me alive. Those are some good times, going to meetings and learning how to work the steps and learning how to, I don't know, just go through life and try to be the best person that we could be. That was some of the best times of my life were in that house with all the guys.
Your hyperactivity just made me laugh, man. You just couldn't hold still to save your life. It's like,
Yes.
remember that big coffee table you brought to the house? That one that had about
Definitely
6,000
built that
nails.
while I was intoxicated. I put 100 too many nails in that.
I was like, wow, he was up all night with
Might have
this
been
one.
up all month with that one. That was pretty
Yeah,
wild, but, well,
yeah,
thank you so much, Scott, for coming on the podcast and
yeah,
for sharing a little bit about,
yeah, man.
your story and your life and your
My
experience with
pleasure.
addiction and recovery. And,
Yeah.
I think I speak for everyone, all of our viewers and listeners, that, we really appreciate your genuineness and your honesty. So, absolutely, it was a
Well,
pleasure.
thank you for having me.
Alrighty, and for everybody out there watching and listening, as always, if you or a loved one have anybody that's struggling, you can reach out to our admissions team 24/7 by dialing 816-597-1177. We are here. We have personal experience. We will not judge you, and we will find ways to try to welcome you into this path of recovery. Until next time, I'm Taylor, your host, and this is Finding Mental Wellness. Have a great day.